my sketches today. They have been transformed into a magnificent creation of an animation. A twist on the theory that dogs, they go into pizza shops and hot dog shops to take those things, but they don't just take it. They replace it for something. Replace it, and then the people who are there, they have to figure out who is bringing them these replacements and replacing their hot dog for something else. So you will see it, and you're ready. Watch out.
In a fateful worldly dimension of a small city called Bimbledot, there was once a visiting doggy. Strolling in, he found interest in a certain small blue mailbox and decided to stay right beside it for the night. As the following morning approached, a mailman strutted in the scene, and boy, did he toss those newspapers. He attempted to do so for the upcoming buildings, letting that single paper zip over toward that blue box, all the way over top the sleeping doggy's head, that whom the mailbox hadn't even noticed. But the newspaper bounced off the mailbox, landing directly on top of the sleeping doggy's head. Of course, this new thunk caught Doggy off guard, and he had to peek an eyeball open, hoping to investigate said object that had plucked him on top of the head. As much as he wanted to investigate said object, a certain creak quickly snapped the dog to return to sleeping below. Just as the hot dog store's door swung open and someone exited said hot dog store, Doggy didn't want to call attention to himself. Alas, the single pedestrian person passed, wobbling and tripping, although trailing along a rather nice scent as they attempted to balance something on a small tray. As the self-clumsy pedestrian wobbled past, the dog instantly rushed forth, trailing along through that now open doorway, where an even stronger aroma of that scent was drafting out. Inside the shop, he peered around, instantly catching the whiff of a certain smell of delicacy. Strangely, as he noticed, there was an entire display case of already wrapped hot dogs, a table stacked with colorful condiments placed just beside. The dog just couldn't contain his curiosity. With one single leap upward, he arrived on the top counter, shuffling through the dogs. A dog scrambling through other dogs, practically tripping and falling into each of those giant hollowed-out sections, dropping that newspaper from his mouth, snatched up a hot dog from the counter below in the process, when suddenly he heard a familiar creak of a doorway from behind and instantly leapt off, though taking that hot dog with him as he went. Meanwhile, the now revealed hot dog shop owner came wallowing out from the back door, having successfully dried off his hands with a dish towel after a good job with the dishes. He draped the towel over the edge. That's when he noticed the odd scrap of paper tucked away within that hot dog stand of his and grew curious. Slightly annoyed, though, that someone would leave such a trinket in such an unfit spot. Although curious enough, too, since there was currently no one in his shop. So he waddled over and plucked up said small newspaper, glancing around once more to be certain that there was no one, just perhaps hiding behind some table or corner waiting to pop out and flee the scene. But with none revealed, he himself ambled off, wondering, whoever could that culprit be. But little did he know that from just behind another was watching, a small particular dog from the peeped open doorway, one now stuffed with shock and dropping said hot dog from his mouth at the possible revelation that pedestrians maybe enjoy these papers filled with newspapers. Yeah. Doggy considered such a possibility of, instead of purely hot dog stealing, exchanging. And thus he wasn't ready to wander off quite yet, thus returning back out to his favorite fascinating blue mailbox just outside the hot dog shop. The day passed, and so did the night, with Doggy himself not departing, all hoping that mail dude could possibly return with another paper roll so he could make another exchange. As luck would have it, the next morning arrived, and in return to that mail dude strutting along the sidewalk toward the blue mailbox and the sleeping doggy, tossing one single newspaper over top of the doggy. Instantly, the dog associated this dude with the newspaper and thus exchanged and perked up. He was ready to fulfill another plan of exchange. As the doggy noticed the rolled up paper flying his direction, he instantly leapt upward, and in his urge to capture said paper, another pedestrian came out from the hot dog shop, and boy, the dog's upbeat leap gave the the approaching customer a fright, causing him to become even more clumsy than the previous day's wobbler. Luckily, both caught what they needed, the dog his paper and the clumsy dude said hot dog, though strangely plopping said item on top of his head, perhaps as if there was a better balance up there. With a little wiggle waggle of his tail, checking to make sure that the pedestrian with a now hot dog hat had now officially departed, he returned all his doggy attention back to that hot dog shop, leaping in through the creaked open doorway. Thus, the doggy braced and leapt up, ready to do his exchange. However, he did notice how the shop's owner had lifted said newspaper out from the pre-made hot dogs and seemingly uncomfortably shook off the hot dog gunk, and thus decided to place said newspaper in a location of better quality than he had the day before. So his eyes landed on top of that front counter, a similar blue as his favorite fascinating mailbox from outside, and also the one the shop owner had draped that floppy dish towel against. Doggy assumed that counter was where pedestrians placed objects, and thus considered a box of floppy napkins would be best fit for a rolled up floppy piece of parchment, and so placed 2 and 2 together. With part 1 of his exchange complete, it was time to initiate part 2, and thus hopped on back over to take his pick of pre-made dog. Hot dog. Though at the same time, the dog swore he heard some creaky noise coming from behind that back room's doorway. Snatching up the nearest floppy hot dog, he leapt off it as entered the hot dog store owner fellow. And as the owner dude approached his front counter, however, he was even more bewildered to discover a newspaper embedded in his napkin box. Startled so much enough that he practically tripped over his own toes and sent that hot dog in his hand soaring. He went tumbling, landing smack on the ground. Once the hot dog soared up overhead and smacked directly on top of his hat, he considered for a moment on the ground, and glanced up to scrutinize that rolled up piece of parchment. Considering the situation, he glanced back and forth around the shop, hoping for that rando, now he suspects is the mailman, to pop out and just reveal himself. So he glanced at the newspaper, observing its every crinkle, every wrinkle, then slowly unraveled today's news. Surprised he was to find describing something about a pizza shop next door.
So my neighbor's competition's doing some advertising, huh? Maybe I myself should drop an ad for my dogs too. Hot dogs.
But the hot dog shop owner dude couldn't exactly rack the thought away that all his newspapers were going to be delivered inside his shop from now on, in odd location, and realized he needed to do something about this. Thus, he took out a pencil and wrote down a little note on that newspaper, scribbling that whomever is delivering these papers needs to please leave newspapers in the mailbox, with an added ... question mark to conclude, because he had no idea why such a mail carrier would bring in the newspaper and place it in his slimy hot dogs, and plop down that green writing utensil pencil of his. And his eyes were turned up. He realized he had a customer waiting, one asking for a pizza. To this, he only could shrug, shaking his head back and forth in a
no
response to say that
we only serve hot dogs here.
And
if you're looking for pizza, it's a door over.
Said customer, realizing and concluding that hot dogs were not pizza, waddled out of the shop. Now remembering that on her way into this hot dog shop, she'd seen a pizza sign on top of the shop next door, but had just glossed it over. Ooh. Outside the shop now, frizzy pink hair customer, whom I shall name Frimp because of frizzy pink, suddenly became distracted from her pizza-oriented goal as she noticed a certain doggy practically wedged underneath a certain blue mailbox. Curious, she wondered if said dog was supposed to be wedged under said certain blue mailbox, but as her eyes trailed off to the small shop beside, lost all concept of a dog mailbox, remembering in full potential of her first and foremost goal, discovering pizza. Instantly, she sprinted on in, flinging open that doorway as the doggy came out from his mailbox hiding place, flinging his special hot dog up into the air and letting it flop down below, and digging a certain special hole to bury said certain steam dog. Yet Frimp couldn't help but glance back out, separating from her goal dream of the pizza doorway, glancing out at this dog oddly burying a hot dog. And honestly, considering the fact that, as indicated by a sign on the hot dog shop's front door, there were no paws of any sort allowed in said hot dog shop. She also considered that if perhaps Doggy would enjoy a slice of the full-on pizza she was going to order. But no. Once re-entering such a pizza shop, she decided that the entirety of her pizza would be a thing kept all to herself. Thus, she enjoyed it on her way out, paying not even slightest attention to the dog burying his dirt mound from behind. Only at last moment did she remember that dog, whipping a head around to wonder if he'd ever had the opportunity to taste pizza. But what could she do? And And so she ambled off, leaving the dog there to remain the entire day beside his giant mound of buried delicacy. Doggy considered having a good place to store his treasures, because he really had no idea when that mailman would be back. Perhaps every morning. If so, he would be ready. So as the day passed along, the night to come, his dreams wafted with the smell of that pizza that one customer had exited with. He could only wonder perhaps if his newspaper exchanges would work with more than just hot dogs. As the next day's breeze came in, the dog instantly went on high alert. Doggy could barely contain his excitement as mailman due to come along and drop off his famous exchanging device. As mailman approached, the dog instantly reverted back to the sleeping position, made his move so as not to arouse attention to himself, and thus watched the paper fly overhead, landing directly on that fascinating blue box. Perfectly, this time the rolled up newspaper landed, and the dog felt himself ready to initiate his plan, and thought so great, so glorious, as he raised up high to lift up that newspaper, and ready in mouth, he ambled off down the sidewalk and directly beside the pizza shop's closed doorway. Still closed doorway. He sat there for a moment with the newspaper, perhaps expecting that doorway to swing open any moment now, and just as he heard the familiar creak of the doorway, he knew to sit and wait as that orange-haired one ambled out of the shop. With a small salute to the doggy could barely contain his excitement, as once orange curly-haired, whom I shall name Orange Curl, departed. Doggy made his move, speeding forth through the open doorway.
Thus he reached in, picking up a tiny scrap, dripping in a liquidy cheesiness. Pizza man didn't notice the onlooking hot dog store owner spying in, however. So unfurling the newspaper and revealing the inner contents of today's news, said Deer Park Board. But quickly too, for from behind came the essence of a creaking doorway. Doggy instantly leapt off. He read around the wavy lines of cheese and tomato sauce, but from behind came thrusting in the other dude, going all in with the fact that the pizza shop owner was holding a newspaper, one with the hot dog store's address on it. That could only mean one thing. You are my newspaper prank delivery dude. You took my newspaper out from my mailbox, and you are the nuisance. Glass, and he jabbed a finger at the pencil dude, explaining all the various places he discovered said pranks, disapprovingly waggling that finger of his. But alas, meanwhile, in the process, Pizza Man could only glance around, slightly confuzzled at the oddity of the similarity of where he'd found the newspaper in his store owner's display case. However, so unfurling the head over, shaking it back and forth, the contents of today's news.
I have no idea why I received any sort of paper. I don't order the morning paper. I don't even have a
He read around the wavy lines of cheese and tomato sauce, but from behind came thrusting in the other dude, going all in with the fact that the pizza shop owner was holding a newspaper, one with the hot dog store's address on it. That could only mean one thing. You are my newspaper prank delivery dude. You took my newspaper out from my mailbox, and you are the nuisance. He jabbed a finger at the pencil dude, explaining all the various places he discovered said pranks, disapprovingly waggling that finger of his. The pizza dude exclaimed, to protest more in defense, but he was still holding up that newspaper, puzzled at the oddity of the similarity of where he'd found the newspaper in his pizza display case. Instantly, he whipped the head over, shaking it back and forth to communicate his response.
No idea how it ended up I received any sort of paper. No one but me is allowed behind said counter space. But no. Plus, this is my delivering anything where I serve pizza slices, not napkin wraps. Nor even paper certainly doesn't belong to your mailbox.
Hot Dog Man considered this for a moment, and could only bring up one other certain culprit, the mailman. Pizza dude, ready to be free of blame, quickly agreed, and his hot dog dude yelped at the sight of a certain someone passing by. He followed out the door, heading toward this certain someone. Hot dog dude had no pizza dude exclaimed, to protest more in defense, but he was still holding up that newspaper.
Really, I just found this piece of paper embedded in my giant pizza countertop just now. I have no idea how it ended up there. Considering that no one but me is allowed behind said counter space. Plus, this is my pizza shop where I serve pizza slices, not newspaper scraps. This paper certainly doesn't belong here.
Hot Dog Man considered this for a moment, and could only only bring up one other certain culprit, the mailman. Pizza Dude, ready to be free of blame, quickly agreed, and as Hot Dog Dude yelped at the sight of a certain someone passing by, quickly followed. Out the door, heading toward this certain someone Hot Dog Dude had noticed outside.
Certainly, as much as their questions hadn't been answered, another part and Hot Dog shop owner Dude were rather offended, as each considered their own delicacy the best. Meanwhile, there was one other surprise, however, crouching behind a building. Surprised at this late afternoon delivery, but two were surprised to be standing up to the greatest rival, the mailman, and separated back to their daily activities was scratched the tip of his head in confusion. They literally had no idea why they were dramatically separating off to, thus had to crisscross back to their own shops. Entry and nor had any idea why they would bring up some random. Only after this call came, the doggy decided to amble out. He had no idea that Hot Dog or Pizza Dude exited their shops ever, but for the night he returned to his fascinating favorite blue mailbox, and thus wedged them. None else exited either shop throughout the night.
The dog figured to wait until morning to make his next exchange. Meanwhile, that night, Hot Dog Dude, now considered Pizza Dude his bestest buddy,
As much as their
called
questions hadn't been answered,
Pizza Dude, although slightly
Hot Dog
annoyed at his
shop owner
competition,
Dude
is
were
acting
rather
like his own
offended,
buddy.
as each considered
Thus
their
listened
own
rather
delicacy the
silently,
best.
almost
Meanwhile,
sleepily through the
there was one
conversation.
other surprise.
He really just wanted to head out for the night. Suddenly, then, Hot Dog Dude brought up the idea of a certain merging of pizza and a hot dog, and
to the
Tom,
greatest
he perked
rival,
up, thinking
the
that perhaps
mailman,
merging
and
hot dog
separated
and
back
pizza
to their daily
isn't
activities
such a bad idea.
Thus, the next day, they said had no idea why they were dramatically separating off to. They awaited thus had to crisscross back to their own shops. Entry and now the sidewalk was empty. Only when nightfall came, the doggy decided to amble out. He had no idea that Hot Dog or Pizza Dude exited the shop.
Felt a nudge from
for
his
the
hot dog
night, he
shop
returned to
owner
his
buddy.
fascinating
Apparently,
favorite
he spotted something.
familiarly known something.
None else
Only to notice
exited
it was
either
the arrival of their
shop
arch
throughout
enemy,
the
the
dog
mailman.
figured to wait until
He
morning to
stared
make
at
his
his Pizza
next
Dude, tapping his foot
exchange.
impatiently.
Meanwhile,
while
that night,
standing
Hot
rather
Dog Dude, now
stiffly
considered
as
Pizza
Mail Dude
Dude
passed
his bestest
along,
buddy,
with
called
spring
Pizza
in his
Dude.
step.
Pizza Dude,
But
although
as
slightly
the
annoyed at
newspaper
his
went
competition,
flying,
is
landing
acting like
directly
his
on
own
top of
buddy.
Hot Dog shop
Thus listened rather
mailbox.
silently,
The two
almost
shop
sleepily
owners
through the
couldn't contain their
conversation.
anger at this
He
dude
really just wanted
returning
to
and
head
ran
out for
after
the
him.
night. Suddenly,
Mail
then,
Dude,
Hot Dog
Mail
Dude brought
Dude,
up the
can't
idea
believe
of
it's so
certain
you
merging
tossing my
of
papers.
pizza
And
and
just
a hot
like
dog.
that, Mail Dude halted,
He
raising
perked
a
up,
shaky
thinking
hand
that
to his
perhaps
mouth,
merging hot
rather
dog and
confused
pizza
at the
isn't actually
outrage
such a
of
bad
such his
idea.
meager
Thus,
action
the next
of
day, they
filling
set up
the
their
newspaper.
booth.
Perhaps
Proudly
leaning
mentioned
against
his
it, they
beloved
awaited the
preference for
upcoming afternoon
sandwiches
flock,
and
but to see that Hot Dog Dude had dropped on the
Pizza
floor
Dude
below. Only one who
organized.
noticed that was the
Slightly
doggy from
rearranging the
behind.
slices and
Luckily,
dogs,
everyone was standing in front of the
shuffling
blue
all
mailbox, and
over
thus
the
the
order
dog
when
easily
suddenly
swooped in
felt
from
a
behind,
nudge from
plucking
his
the
hot dog
small
shop
wrapped
owner
delicacy in
buddy.
his mouth, and
Apparently,
quickly
he
digging
spotted
up
something,
a
quickly
familiarly
digging up his
known
pile, adding it to
something.
his
Only to
stash.
notice it was the
Up in
arrival of
air,
their
he
arch
tossed
enemy, the
giving
mailman.
a wondrous
He
leap at the
stared
same
at
time,
him,
then
Pizza Dude
replacing
tapping
all
his
the
foot
loose
impatiently,
soil
both
grains
standing
back
rather
into place.
stiffly as Mail Dude was getting the yell of his life ringing in his
couldn't
steps.
just
But
smash
as
the
the
hot
newspaper
dog.
went
He
flying,
exchanged
landing
it,
directly
then
on top of the
zipped
hot
back
dog
over to
shop's
his favorite
mailbox.
fascinating
The two
mailbox.
shop owners
They
couldn't
just
contain their
smashed
anger
that
at
small
this
piece of
dude
newspaper
returning and
and
ran
now for
after
once
him.
more.
You Mail Dude,
Yeah,
you Mail Dude.
please,
Can't believe it's still you tossing my papers. And just like that, Mail Dude halted, raising a shaky hand to his mouth. Certainly, to get to that paper on the outrage of such his meager directly onto that stand. Now that the exchange had occurred, the dog was in the vicinity of a thousand favorite. But to see that Hot Dog Dude had dropped the hot dog, he just worried me one who noticed that was the doggy from behind. Thus, he went ahead with thinking everyone was standing in front of the real exchange, and the dog easily swooped delicacies in his mouth, plucking the small wrapped delicacy in his mouth, and quickly digging up behind it, quickly leapt off the pile, adding it to his stash. Up in the air, he behind, giving a wondrous scream at the same time, then replacing the realization of a random dog place, destroying their was getting the yell of his life, but he couldn't just quickly match the hot dog. Now they themselves hid behind the back over to his favorite fascinating as that dog strode away. What are you doing with that small piece of newspaper? Nothing, it seemed. And so the three pedestrians still staring at the dog in the distance. And that's when the tall, and the dog noticed the odd paper balanced directly on top of the hot dog stand. He reached over, plucking tiny parts of it. Now that the exchange had occurred, the dog was in the vicinity of a thousand favorite and mouthful items. Plus, it seemed the hot dog he did buried was practically tossed over to him. Thus, he went ahead with thinking that this must be the real exchange, and scooped one of each his delicacies
arms
in his
leaning
mouth.
behind his head.
Then, though,
The hot dog dude, well, all he could do was smack a hand to his face.
Leapt off the counter,
Meanwhile,
he
Pizza Dude
sprinted up
unraveled
the
that
street,
rolled up piece of parchment,
literally noticing it was one of those odd
newspapers
newspapers
from
from
earlier.
earlier.
For the
But from the
realization
dog's
of a
perspective,
random
well,
dog
he had his
was
treat.
destroying
But suddenly he heard a
the
voice from
realization
back
of
at the
hot dog
stand. He
to
just
stand.
traded the goodies for.
Oh, what a
Now they
doggy
themselves
and
hid
you
behind the
delivered your
shop,
newspapers
peering out to
inside
see
your
as
shop.
the dog
How
strode
help.
away. What are you doing
Instantly,
here?
the dog swung around
Nothing,
in
it
such a
seemed.
cheerful
And
tone.
so the three pedestrians
it was
ambled
difficult
out,
to amble all the way
still
over
staring
that
at the dog in
giant
the
pizza and
distance.
hot dog so well,
And that's
tossed
when
them
the
up in the
pizza
air,
dude
figuring he would
noticed
just
the odd
pick them up
paper
wherever
balanced
they
directly on top
landed
of
on
the
the
hot dog
sidewalk.
stand.
But
He
first,
reached
Mail Dude
over,
was calling him
plucking
over
tiny
and beating
parchment
him
from
over,
his
and thus
pocket,
the
placed
dude
in a
dog
rattling
lived up
such
to
a
the
paper.
friendly
The male dude waddled over from behind came the hot dog and pizza, soaring and spiraling round and round, and as much as they attempted to shield their faces with one hand to their face, smacking slap into the faces of both the dudes would normally just sell such the item. The hot dog dude, all he could do was smack a hand to his face,
the newspaper he
but
found.
meanwhile, he did unravel that rolled up piece of dog,
literally
noticing it was one of those odd newspapers from earlier, but from the dog's perspective, well, he had his shop sign, but suddenly he heard a voice from back up the sand. He just traded the goodies for.
Oh, what a cute doggy, and he delivered your newspapers inside your shops. How helpful.
Instantly, the dog smiled around only once in a cheerful tone, and well, it was difficult to amble all the way over with that giant pizza and hot dog, so well, the shop's owner prepared, figuring he would just do from behind, staring down at that pizza, possibly pondering. But first, the male dude was calling him over, waving him over, and wasn't the dude dog anymore. Having forgotten from behind came the hot dog and pizza, soaring and spiraling round and round, and as much as they attempted to shoot their faces with one hand to their face, smacking slap into the faces of both the dudes would normally just sell such the item. As male dude hugged his best bud, pizza dude gestured the newspaper he found, seasoning all their anger across his face, and the hot dog wasn't that worried, for at least I have the rest of the lunch crowd to serve. That is until, yeah, everyone, this pizza stand is an operative, and it was lazy shop owners, and I saw one of them holding a dog. Other pizza and hot dogs are certainly contaminated with keeping those parts outside. So I head on over to that sandwich shop on the next street over, and just like that, friendly pet time. But one shopkeeper customer who had dragged away the rest of the owner protesting. The hot dog dude from behind, staring down at his pizza, possibly pondering if pizza owner dude, a dude with a smaller business than hot dog dude, wasn't his favorite pizza down below, having slapped him in the face. However, back in face, but the customer noticed that the outer shop had gathered a crowd. There was one customer directly in front of the menu, but no one was standing there to serve hot dogs. I trailed down with only frustration in mind. The dude ambled off, the hot dog dude waving a hand after concerned, now brought inside his shop by the mail dude, and considered to go the sign on his door wasn't that worried, or at least I have the rest of the lunch crowd to serve. That is until, yeah, everyone, this pizza stand is an operative, and with lazy shop owners. And I saw one of them holding a dog. Well, just hot dogs are certainly contaminated right at his front counter. With that dog in his hands. Well, not just the dog. Just strangely enough, the dude yanked up the cash register and swung it all around and over his head, replacing the dog in place of the cash register. Just as the dog was placed, he snatched up a little newspaper from the mail dude's bag, taking with him just as the mail dude went and sat down in a chair. Can you believe the nerve? Into the shop, pizza dude and hot dog dude went, disapproving looks on their faces as they observed as such that the dude was really holding a cash register. And that's when the hot dog shop owner realized that it had been this dog who'd been the one responsible for pupping pranks all over his hot dog shop, and sprinted over directly, finger jabbed forth, holding that crossed out sign. He plucked off his door to satisfy the present time situation. But as he plucked that dog off the countertop, he couldn't help but grow curious at that small folded newspaper in his mouth. Because strange as it was, he hadn't received that day's newspaper yet. Plus, something on the paper had also caught his eye, unraveling it in his hands. Well, not just the dog. Strangely enough, the dude yanked up the cash register and swung it all around and over his head, replacing the apparently the dog cash register. Just as dog was placed, wedged between his hands, hot dog store owner from his own imagination, imagining such as that dog balancing set up in a chair's head, like, I don't know, a triple stack dude and hot dog dude went, disapproving looks on their faces as they observed as such that dude really holding a cash register, and that's why the hot dog shop owner realized that it had been he asked over who'd been the one responsible for being pranked all over his hot dog shop, and sprinted over directly, finger jabbed forth, holding that crossed out sign. He plucked off his door to satisfy the present time situation, and just like that, he plopped the dog down on the countertop, hot dog on head, and stood curious how long it would take for that hot dog to go from eyeing off. Because strange as it was, he hadn't received that day's and the dog had literally began bouncing about. The paper had sprinted on his paws up and down with a paw leap, unraveling it and a hint of ballet.
Famous wonder dog
And hot dog dude could only blink blankly from behind as that dog continued his rather confused one foot in front of the other, planking over his napkin dog wedged between his hands, plunking over the napkin dispenser and straw his own imagination, imagining such that dog balancing whatever guy could only slightly complain from between his triple stack of pizzas. Then, well, the two dudes glanced at each other, and they could only think to themselves, maybe this head bringing them wasn't so bad for their business, and wasn't so bad in general, and so upwards they cheered, and so they just had handed over a hot dog, reorganizing their stand outside, kind of hesitantly though, they didn't want to get this dog just near their hot dog, and thus came in the crowd an adventure of serving just delicacies and hot the dog down on the countertop, hot dog on head and stood there to see how long it would take dude took out for that hot dog very to go for an eye symbol, but it didn't. Taking out loud and free from their lives. And the dog had literally began bouncing about. He sprinted on his paws up and down with a paw leap and then a forward leap, swooping up and delivering that hot dog from right on top of his head. Hot dog dude could only blink blankly from behind as that dog continued his advance, going one foot in front of the other, clanking over his napkin dispenser, and as the clanking over the napkin dispenser and straw accomplished shop owners sat down with the hot dog guy who slightly complained from between his teeth. Then, the two goods glanced at each other, and they could only think to themselves, and so we high-five. Creature wasn't so bad for their business, and wasn't so bad in general, and so upwards they cheered, and so they decided to catch the evening crowd, reorganizing their stand outside some newspapers with some page internal news could lead to acquiring some new buds. Thus came in the crowd an adventure of serving up delicacies and hot dogs and pizzas, none sandwiches, and what a day! Out from the shop, the pizza dude took out the trash, a very red cross symbol within, taking it all out and free from their lives. That dog, well, he leapt on over.
One hot dog coming right on up.
The dog leapt upward, swooping up and delivering that hot dog from right on top of his head.
Why, thank you.
Hot dog dude plucked up the hot dog and passed it right over to the next customer in line. And so the day passed, all the day away to night, and as the moon returned overhead, the two, feeling quite accomplished shop owners, sat down with their new doggy as he waggled his tail back and forth in a swoosh, swooshed in the moon, in a loop against the nighttime sky in the city of Bimbledot. And so we high-five, 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 hi doggy, hi doggy, hi doggy, and close up to the face. Who knew exchanging some newspapers with some page internal news could lead to acquiring some new buds?
And now here it is, just quicken up the speed a little. So it's like a quick, fast story. Pace, whoop.
My beautiful sketches all over here. One scenery of it, another scenery of it, more sceneries. Speaking on the telephone, his little telephone, all the little men as they're sequencing from their hands, going, haha, clappity clap clap. Oh. The male guy in the beginning, he looked kind of like this. Then like this girl, I got rid of her nose because it looked like a big old blob, and I didn't want a big old blob. The characters, they changed throughout. The dog, I think he got like less defined because in the beginning he was like this. He was like an actual doggy, and then he was like more like this, and then for the end of it all, that doggy. He's that doggy. He's a beautiful doggy. A beautiful animation video. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my beautiful story of the dog. He figures out how to give a newspaper in place of taking a hot dog or pizza, and then after that, these other dudes, they come, and then they have to figure out who has actually been delivering their newspapers because they have no idea, and then after they're like, oh yeah, so then they discover it's a dog, and then they shouldn't be blaming the mailman who's actually been putting it in the right location, although he has been tossing it along. Ooh. You know, not to mention the fact that my very last page of this entire story was on the very last page of this sketchbook. Well, sketchbook. It's a book with many things. I don't know why it has all these different, it has sections. There are blank pages. Oh, wait, are they blank? No, they have tiny dots. Okay. Yeah.